and welcome to the Kim Iverson Show. Thank you so much for joining us. Is Trump the anti-war candidate? According to him, he is. Take a look at this clip that he actually unveiled the other day.
World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America Last globalists and the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the national security industrial complex. One of the reasons I was the only president in generations who didn't start a war is that I was the only president who rejected the catastrophic advice of many of Washington's generals, bureaucrats, and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into conflict, but they don't know how to get us out. For decades, we've had the very same people, such as Victoria Nuland and many others just like her, obsessed with pushing Ukraine toward NATO, not to mention the State Department support for uprisings in Ukraine. These people have been seeking confrontation for a long time, much like the case in Iraq and other parts of the world, and now we're teetering on the brink of World War III. And a lot of people don't see it, but I see it, and I've been right about a lot of things. They all say Trump's been right about everything. None of this excuses in any way the outrageous and horrible invasion of Ukraine 1 year ago, which would have never happened if I was your president. Not even a little chance.
All right, with us now is Christian Parenti. He is an investigative journalist, also a professor of economics at John Jay College. Recently wrote a piece for The Gray Zone titled "Trump Against Empire. Is That Why They Hate Him?" Christian, welcome to the show. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Good to be with you.
Okay, so you lay out in your piece pretty clearly how Trump is somewhat of an really like an anti-empire president, even if his motives were maybe a bit different than your typical person who's maybe anti-empire. So do you think he is actually the anti-war president?
Yeah, I mean, his track record is that he didn't start any new wars, and he took significant steps towards ending ongoing wars. He withdrew half the U.S. troops from Iraq. He withdrew half the U.S. troops from Afghanistan, and he negotiated, or his administration negotiated, the end of that war. Even though the Afghan withdrawal took place under Biden, that was all conditioned on this long process of negotiation that the Trump administration had done, and it would have been a much bloodier and more chaotic withdrawal had that agreement not been in place. He also withdrew troops from Somalia, almost all of the troops from Somalia. He withdrew large numbers of troops from Syria. People are more familiar with the fact that the remaining troops were then redeployed to where Syria has oil. It has a very limited amount of oil, produces only about 300,000 barrels a day, and that's all for internal consumption. He refused to escalate in Libya. He did allow John Bolton and the CIA to attempt to foment a coup in Venezuela, but once that met opposition, he grew bored of it. He started openly criticizing John Bolton, criticizing the putative head of the movement in Venezuela, Juan Guaido, as the Beto O'Rourke of Venezuela. And more importantly than just the simple metric of, did he start wars or wind them down, he went after American empire in some really profound ways. He ordered the withdrawal of 1/3 of the U.S. troops in Germany. His second defense secretary, Mark Espers, managed to redeploy many of those into Europe. Trump ordered them to come home. Espers did his best to stop that. But more important than the sheer number of troops withdrawn is the qualitative damage that would do to the American empire. I mean, NATO is about much more than just protecting Europe. The 40 American bases in Germany project power into 104 different countries. AFRICOM is headquartered in Germany. And Trump was repeatedly talking about withdrawing the U.S. from NATO, which is to say exploding and destroying NATO, which is to say really damaging American empire. So, yeah, I think that the track record shows that Donald Trump was the anti-war president. Does that mean he's a pacifist and would never go to war? No. He also, launched 2 airstrikes against Syria. He, killed Soleimani in Iran. I mean, he was not opposed to using force, but his record is pretty remarkable. And I think that is why they hate him. I think that is what explains the attacks on Donald Trump and his base. Because the reason I wrote this article was in conversation with friends of mine about the accumulating weird facts that would indicate that the FBI has been, setting up MAGA types and all this stuff. And I'm kind of agnostic on that, but just wanting to discuss this. And a number of friends of mine just couldn't even accept that this would happen, because why would the ruling class, why would the powers that be, the elite, why would they turn against Trump? He gave them everything they wanted. He gave them tax breaks. He gave them deregulation. And that's all true. But if you look abroad, if you look at his foreign policy, he really vandalized the American empire. He did it for reasons that are different than many leftists would do. I mean, he's not a left-wing anti-imperialist, but his logic tended to be crassly transactional. He saw the American empire, he sees the American empire as a poorly run security business where a bunch of foreigners are ripping us off, getting protection, and they should be paying for it. And he started saying he wanted cost plus 50%. So that's a very different logic than anti-imperialists of the left would have, but the effect was the same. The effect was that he shook and damaged American empire. And American empire is essential to the power and wealth of the American 1%, the American ruling class.
And that's what I found the most interesting about your perspective, is that you're able to actually, because many of us have said, okay, but Trump really, he the first president to not start wars. Of course, there was the argument when Joe Biden got out of Afghanistan. A lot of people said, oh, but Joe Biden is really the anti-war president because he got us disastrously out of Afghanistan. And my argument was always, no, he didn't. They're just moving to an over-the-horizon style. This is what Tony Blinken has always been wanting to do with West Exec Advisors. They've been talking about this forever, that they're wanting to move to an over-the-horizon style form of warfare moving forward. They don't want boots on the ground. It's just a new way, which is what they've ultimately done to Afghanistan. We didn't really end the war there. We just shifted it. It looks different, that's all. But it was still this, oh no, Joe Biden is the anti-war president, not Donald Trump. He didn't really actually get us out of any of these places. As you mentioned, he still left troops behind. Syria, we've got them, the remnants are still all around. But I think just even though there's this argument that he certainly did
and Joe Biden has increased, just to note for a second, I mean, Joe Biden then, he redeployed troops to Somalia, for example. So Biden has been undoing much of what Trump did. But sorry, go on.
Yeah. So right. I think the Joe Biden administration is, in particular with his State Department and his Department of Defense, I just think they're absolutely fundamentally dangerous. It was the same people that were going to be there with Hillary Clinton, fundamentally dangerous people. But and they're the ones really, I think, the puppet masters behind all of this. Joe Biden's just kind of like fumbling along like, okay, all right, we'll do what you want. And that was, I think, maybe what they wanted Trump to do, right, was to just fumble along and do what he was told. And the guy is so mercurial, you can't get him to do what you want him to do. He just does what he wants. But I found the most interesting about your analysis is you're able to pinpoint his motive. And that is where no one has really been able to figure out, okay, if Trump is the anti-war president, but then we've got all of these contradictions. He's not really, but the motive. And it's interesting that you're able to pinpoint it to, he basically sees the U.S. as a business. He's a businessman. And he sees the United States as in a bad business model. The business model of we're just going to muscle our way around the world. And he's like, why are we doing that? That's not the good way to run a business. We should transform this into more of an economic type of system. So that's a really interesting point. Do you think then, he's obviously going up against Joe Biden here in 2024. If it comes down to those two candidates, which it may, is Trump the better candidate, I guess, is what a lot of us who never would have dreamed of voting for Donald Trump. I'm sitting here thinking, he'll get me this time. I never voted for the guy before, but maybe this time he might get me if it comes down to those two.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to advocate voting for Donald Trump, but
Right.
I do think that the track record is pretty clear given this proxy war in the Ukraine, which Joe Biden is all in favor of. That Trump is the anti-war candidate, at least. His policies in terms of the environment and workers' rights and stuff like that are definitely much worse than Joe Biden's. But it's a tough call because, of course, this proxy war is quite serious. It's not hyperbolic to imagine scenarios whereby atomic war could start from this. So that's pretty serious stuff. Yeah, it's tough, but yeah.
Well, and that's what a president really is in charge of. Your day-to-day life, a president, as we saw during the pandemic, for example, it's the governors, it's the mayors, the people in your local communities really have more impact on your day-to-day than the president of the United States. But where they do have an impact on your daily life is foreign policy, getting
Yes,
us into
absolutely.
wars, deploying troops. So
Yeah.
it is, if you're going to pick a one issue, a lot of people are one issue voters. If you're going to be a one issue voter, this is almost the one issue that you should actually decide your vote on, is which one is going to
Perhaps.
march us into the conflict.
Yeah. Another thing about his motive that I didn't really highlight in that article is that he's got his, transactional sensibility, but he's also a very intuitive politician, and he can read where people are at, and he's aware of the fact that his base does not like these wars, not because they're progressive anti-war people, but because they live in heartland America and it's crumbling around them. And you don't have to be that up on the news to know that America is sending billions upon billions of dollars overseas. And people wonder, what is this about? And also, it's sort of, the working and middle class of heartland America whose children are out fighting these wars. And so he knows that his base doesn't like American empire. They don't have a left-wing critique of it, but basically they like the military, and they think America is great and all that, but they don't understand and they don't approve of why there isn't investment in, at home, why FEMA isn't in East Palestine, Pennsylvania, Ohio, moving people out of this toxic zone, and why there's endless amounts of resources going overseas. And so another part of his motivation that I didn't really deal with in that piece is that he understands that his base is, is anti-war to some extent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, while he's actually in East Palestine, Ohio, Joe Biden is over in Ukraine and Poland giving more money to the war. And Trump is saying, hey, he's eating with them at McDonald's. He's like pushing them through the crowds. I know this menu better than probably all of you as he gets to
Right.
McDonald's. And he's really, connecting with that base that says, why isn't the president here? Why is he all the way over there? It's really fascinating. But at the same time, he was the one that rolled back the regulations on those train brakes. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
so sort of
And he did
caused,
a lot of other, there's a lot of other bad deregulation he did. He rolled back mercury emission standards. All sorts of stuff. So
Right.
yeah, he's not a great guy. He wasn't a great president, but on this one issue, he's definitely superior to Joe Biden. And I think the reason that the powers that be fear him so much is that is the realm in which they couldn't control him. It's often said by conservatives, why do they hate Trump? It's because they can't control him. But then the question is, well, how can't they control him? Because he actually gave them a lot of what they wanted. He basically handed much of domestic policy over to the Koch brothers' agenda, putting Betsy DeVos in charge of the Department of Education, for example. But it's on the foreign policy issue where they simply could not control him. And there's a vignette in the article about how the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who are some of the most powerful men in the world, have a meeting with Trump at the Pentagon in this super secure room, and they explain to him essentially what American empire is, how it works. Basically, that it's not a security business, that it's much more than that. And he is unimpressed, and he says to them, we spent $7 trillion in the Middle East. They're ripping us off. Where's the fucking oil?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Like, wow, we are not going to be able to convince this guy, intimidate this guy, bamboozle and steer him in some direction. He is on his own out there. And when he was asked once by a journalist, where do you get these America First ideas? What's this all about? And he said, I don't know. I've always had these ideas. So I think it's very genuine with Trump,
Yeah.
even if it is rooted in a kind of crass transactional sensibility. It's very real for him. He does not like the deep state. He does not like the military industrial complex, even as he loves the military and it, is a super patriot and all that sort of stuff.
So the biggest question then, you point out that the security state has interfered in 2016 and in 2020 in a variety of ways. Maybe the suppression of Hunter Biden laptop, the Russiagate hoax, right? 2024, are they going to meddle again? And how? I think they did it a little bigger than 2020, just the suppression of Hunter Biden laptop. I'm very open and, I'm suspicious. I'm very suspicious.
Yeah.
But 2024, you think they're going to do it again, and this guy is just not going to get back into office?
Well, what I used to say to people before I researched and wrote this article was that, I just think that if Trump runs, he's going to win the primary, and then he's probably going to win the election. But having written this article, I convinced myself, and I think they're going to do everything they can to prevent him from getting his hands on the levers of American empire again. And many of us in the US are kind of provincial. We don't think about the American footprint abroad and how essential that is to corporate power, to the power of the 1%. It is not a joke, and you cannot mess with that system and get away with it. So, yeah, I don't know what they'll do, but I imagine that they are going to do everything they can to prevent him from being president again. Yeah, who knows? But that's what my instincts would tell me.
Yeah. Such a democratic society we live in.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if they're not prepared to whack him Kennedy style, there may be limits to their overly complicated, Rube Goldberg schemes. And I mean, if things go terribly wrong with the Ukraine war, and there's some confluence of events that make the anti-war element of Trump's message really salient for American voters, it might be impossible for them to prevent him from getting reelected. But my instinct was, in writing this piece, I tried to put myself in the place of people up in the CIA, FBI. I mean, imagine you're one of these people and you watch this guy doing this stuff and you think America's leadership is good and vital, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, wouldn't you then do everything you could to stop him? What are a few laws in the face of the most important, vital empire in world history, right?
And that's the fear, is that people do have the mentality of they will do anything, including break laws, including thwart democracy, in order to do what they believe is the best thing for the greater good, for the greater good.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the greatest fear. Christian, thank you for being here and breaking this down. Really fascinating and surprising. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of people watching the show who absolutely love Trump. They're all for him. There's a lot of people that are hesitant, but at the same time thinking, oh my gosh, but there really is a worse alternative right now, and that person is sitting in the Oval Office as we speak. So, it's kind of this crisis that people are dealing with internally with what are they going to do come 2024. Right. So it's really fascinating. So thank you so much for being here, and really great article. Trump against, the article is on the Gray Zone, Trump Against Empire. Is that why they hate him? Christian Pereni, author of many books, professor of economics, investigative journalist. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kim. Good luck with everything.
All right, guys, it's time to talk about Field of Greens. I love this stuff, actually. It is this wonderful powder. It is made out of whole fruits and vegetables. You mix it into your ice water. or you can sprinkle it onto food, and it gives you your daily dose of all the fruits and vegetables that you need. It's really difficult to get all of our fruits and vegetables into our diet. And, maybe you're really busy, or you're just craving something else and you don't want to eat all those fruits and vegetables. And so you're like, oh, not right now. Well, if you drink your Field of Greens, you can feel better about your diet. That is what I do. I really feel like it gives me a lot of energy, helps me sleep better, and also helps me crave less junk food because I'm getting the nutrients my body needs. Field of Greens, again, made out of whole fruits and vegetables that are freeze-dried, no extracts. That's what makes Field of Greens different, is that it's not made out of any extracts. It's all organic fruits and vegetables. And also what makes it different from other products is they actually select carefully which fruits and vegetables to put into the mix to ensure that there's the highest amount of nutrients available to you. So I personally love the lemon lime. I mix it into ice water. I drink that. It tastes like an iced green tea with lemon. However, I have also used the regular original version that is not flavored, and I've mixed that into broth and drank that as a soup. I also really enjoy that, especially with these winter storms going on. It's getting cold. So probably over the next couple of days, I'm going to be drinking it as a broth, to be quite honest with you, just to stay warm. So go to fieldofgreens.com, use the promo code Kim to get 15% off your first order. It is not the cheapest stuff out there, but that is because it's high quality. So take advantage of the 15% off. Try it out. If you like it, you feel better, let me know. Would love to hear from you. Fieldofgreens.com, promo code Kim, 15% off your first order.
Next year, I will host every member of NATO for our 2024 summit in the United States. Together, we'll celebrate the 75th anniversary of the strongest defensive alliance in the history of the world, NATO. And let there be no doubt, the commitment of the United States to our NATO alliance and Article 5 is rock solid. And every member of NATO knows it. And Russia knows it as well. An attack against one is an attack against all. It's a sacred oath. Sacred oath to defend every inch of NATO territory.
Well, last I checked, Ukraine is not NATO. The NATO alliance has moved closer to Russia inch by inch. With us now to talk about this is former state senator from Virginia, Senator Richard Black. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here. You have a lot of experience in the military. You're former colonel, also was in the Marines. You've got a lot of insight into this. I feel like we're headed into a serious world war. Either that or a very, very cold war. Which one do you think it's going to be?
My projection is that it will be a hot war. I think we have had this on the burner since 2014 when President Barack Obama authorized a coup that overthrew the elected government of Ukraine and installed a revolutionary junta. Afterwards, we began flooding them with very advanced weapons. We built up a very robust Ukrainian armed forces, and they commenced a war against the Russian-speaking areas on the border, but principally the Donbass Republic. And there were 14,000 people who died before Russia ever got involved in the war. So Russia hated to get into this war, and they delayed and delayed and delayed, and they tried to work out arrangements with NATO where NATO would stop its interference right up to their border. But I think the decisions on war don't just come up spontaneously the way we think they do in the movies. They're usually geopolitical maneuvers that are planned sometimes decades in advance, but at least 10 years in advance. And I think this one was. And where it leads us now is we've seen this inevitable escalation where we debated, well, will we send, certain weapons there? And we've gone from missiles and we've gone to HIMARS guided rockets, and now we're up to tanks. It seems fairly clear to me we're going through this little two-step propaganda movement where we're saying, well, we really don't want to send the jets, but other people want to send the jets. Eventually, we're going to send the jets. Just last night, I ran across an article where Britain is going to provide advanced cruise missiles with a range of 180 miles so that these things can be put on the Russian border. We can actually attack deep into Russia itself. And, you know, at a certain point, you say, okay, what's the next thing? The next thing is tactical nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so you know, it seems to be easy for NATO, for Biden to march us towards a war with Russia when it's not near our soil. You know, it's not going to be fought on American soil. It's going to be over there. You're talking about launching missiles deep into Russia. Russia would be looking at potentially attacking Europe. So that, you know, whenever we can get into a war, as long as it's somewhere else, right? That's what we've seen all throughout the Middle East. It was just somewhere else, so it doesn't really affect us over here. What are the chances you think that it will escalate to a point where we're actually attacked here on U.S. soil? What would that look like? Would that mean China has to get involved or North Korea has to get involved and they're launching their missiles at us on the West Coast here where I am, which is very scary? Or, you know, how do you see that playing out? Because it seems to me that if I were in Russia's position, for example, if I were looking at it from their strategic vantage point, I would think the only way to prevent this is to make the other side also fear losing something serious. It seems to be the only way to stop the escalation.
Yeah, your analysis is pretty good. Look, Great Britain has resisted invasion since the Norman Conquest, which was in 1050 or so, 1047, and even Germany under Hitler could not cross 21 miles of English Strait. People have actually swum the, you know, they good swimmers go across the English Channel. There are 5,000 miles between us and Russia. There are 6,000 miles between us and China. The only possibility, the only threat that we face from overseas is a thermonuclear threat. It is a genuine threat because I know there are people in the Pentagon and elsewhere who think, well, if we launched a surprise attack, we could knock out all of their missiles and so forth. The problem is they now have hypersonic missiles that on a moment's notice can fly, and they can actually hit places in the United States, hit places in Europe. There is no defense because they fly at such a speed that there's nothing that can catch up with them. Also, we have Russian submarines with carrying, you know, over 100 missiles, not missiles, but 100 warheads, and they can rain down destruction on New York, on San Francisco, on Washington, D.C., and of course all of the capitals of Europe. They don't want to do this, but we're pushing them further and further. And what's happening now is you've got a lot of very smart people in the Pentagon, in the State Department, and in London, NATO, but they're acting like lemmings, where there's a feeling like, well, we can do this extraordinarily reckless thing, but, you know, Joe and Sam and Kathy, they think it's okay, so I guess everything is fine. And meanwhile, we're charging across a cliff like the lemmings, everybody thinking, well, everybody else says it's okay, and the next thing you're over the cliff. We have never faced a threat of thermonuclear war that ever compared to this, and I'm including. You know, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis. I actually saw troops moving through the state of Florida to go and invade Cuba. So I know what it is And I used to cover myself. When I was a little boy, we'd jump under the desks and we'd cover ourselves. What we're faced today, the American people are totally unaware of it. It is 100 times more dangerous than what we encountered back when I was a little boy. It's genuine, and we keep pushing the line further and further.
What do you think the agenda is? Who is behind wanting to push this line where if this has been decided, as you say, a decade ago, 2014, they were really deciding on, okay, we're going to march ourselves towards a war with Russia. What would be the reason for it?
I think there's a desire to weaken Russia. I think there are certain global interests. There are global oligarchs who look with tremendous interest at the enormous wealth of Russia. Russia has natural resources that are beyond our wildest dreams. Few people are aware of the enormous exports of natural resources. They're the #1 exporter of lumber, of wheat, of fertilizer, of natural gas. They're huge exporters of oil, of aluminum. It just goes on and on, cobalt, manganese, all sorts of things. And there are people who say, look, if I could somehow get control or get a big interest in the oil or the gas or the lumber, I could be a trillionaire. And I think some of those people have an influence over the American government. The American people get nothing. We get absolutely nothing from this. We get the bills. We're the bill payers, but we get nothing out of it. It doesn't serve any legitimate national interest of the United States to be involved in the war.
Right. Yeah. Well, especially if we start sending over troops and we're going to be, and then we've got coffins coming home. It's not. I don't know why they would think that this is a good idea. Part of me thinks that this isn't really going to happen. That this is actually sort of that Russia and the United States are sort of in on it. There's kind of a question about even the Cold War, that the USSR and the United States sort of manufactured the Cold War in order to have the arms race and a space race. I mean, it was just really good for industry fundamentally without even having to fire a shot. And so there's kind of this thinking that maybe we're sort of just redoing the same play where it's, yeah, we're amping up rhetoric, making it sound like there's going to be a real true war. I mean, clearly there is an actual war going on in Ukraine, but the idea that NATO's really truly going to get involved, it's really just a matter of escalating really for industry, really for kind of, forces that we don't really fully understand, Great Reset or something that is trying to march us towards a different place, and that this is all just theater. I don't know if, or because it's just so hard to grasp why there would be any sort of hot war, what the benefit of a hot war would be with Russia or even China for that matter. They keep talking about going in, threatening China or posturing against China because of Taiwan. And, there just really remains a question. What is the actual benefit these days? If you're not looking to conquer land, back in the days, I mean, it was you go to war because you're trying to take something. But now, are they really truly trying to, is there a thinking that they're going to actually take Russia or actually take China? I mean, I just don't see how that's a possibility. So it just feels to me like this is all just escalating theater in order to boost up certain industries and march towards certain agendas that we can't quite, leaving us distracted with running around thinking, oh no, nuclear war, and really they've got something else up their sleeve.
Well, I think if you listen to President Biden, earlier in his presidency, he seemed almost disinterested in things that were happening. He has a passion for this war. And you listen to the speech that you just played. this is not a guy who is just playing games. He is very genuine about it, and he's hoping to hold together this NATO coalition, which, these guys over in Europe, they're very nervous about what's going on, but they're all afraid to stand up to the United States. I really worry that it is genuine, that it's not some sort of a stage presentation, but it's something that is genuine, that has gotten beyond what any one person is likely to control. We seem to be headed. I'd like to tell you that wars are totally rational, but you can go back. I think a good example is what happened with World War I. Historians still debate over who was to blame, how the war started, but it started with the assassination of the Austrian Archduke and his wife. And in the end, 14 million people were dead at the end of First World War. And the stage was set for the Second World War that killed another 50 million. This started with two people. And I think here we're taking steps of phenomenal recklessness. I'll just give you an example. The United States was involved in sinking the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Moskva. It's named after the capital of Russia. 300 young sailors went to the bottom. We probably fired the missiles. We probably controlled them ourselves. We targeted 13 senior Russian field generals for assassination, helped to kill them along working with the Ukrainians. We went beyond, and from what I can tell, there was a drone attack that was launched that went deep into Russia and actually damaged some of their nuclear carrying jet aircraft, some of their nuclear powered or capable bombers. So this was part of their defensive triad. We have various people. We have the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee, who recently agreed with a crazy general who made the comment that we're going to be at war with China by 2025. Now, this is the chairman of the House Foreign Relations Committee. This isn't just some off-the-wall character. And yet he's saying, well, there's some merit to what this general says. We seem to be determined to drive our car at 100 miles an hour into a bridge abutment. We're just aiming for it, and we got our pedal to the metal. It's a bizarre time. I've never experienced it. I've followed foreign affairs for about 70 years. Since I was a little boy, I had a fascination with it. And I've never seen us in a situation like we are today.
So you think we're headed into not only war with Russia, a hot war, but also one with China as well?
I think so. The strategy behind that is it is absolute madness. If you wanted to take down these two big nuclear powers, you would do them one at a time. We, for whatever reason, we've got the ball rolling. We've decided to take them both down simultaneously. And it is a terrible strategy for a lot of reasons, but militarily, just purely militarily, it's a bizarre strategy. But we're in a time when rational people are not controlling events.
Right.
I've always said that unlike some countries, you take Russia, President Putin is kind of the ultimate authority. He, obviously everybody has input, but ultimately he makes the decision. In the United States, and particularly with NATO involved too, there is no central organizing intellect behind foreign policy, behind Western foreign policy. It is sort of an amorphous, moving blob that's constantly shifting. And you would like to think that there's somebody who can simply turn off the switch and say, okay, we're shutting this monster down. But it's not clear that there is.
If we were to go into this hot war, from your perspective, would we win?
No. There would be, the United States would be devastated to the point where perhaps 60% of the population would die within the period of a month. Western Europe would be very similar. London would simply be uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years. Same thing with New York City, with Washington, D.C. There would be places that would be spared. Africa would be spared. There would be perhaps areas of Asia, perhaps Latin America. But Western civilization would die in a nuclear war. And I don't know that it matters to some of the people making the decisions today. It's a little bit eerie to watch it taking place.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And scary that they wouldn't care. Scary that they would march us towards us and that they just, for whatever their purpose is, it just is absolutely frightening. So, hopefully we could stop it. Is there any way, do you think, that, it just we feel powerless, quite frankly. It just doesn't feel like there's anything we the people can do. Even if the polls show the American people are increasingly becoming less interested in funding the war in Ukraine, it doesn't seem to matter to the politicians. They seem to double down. And then you get the Republicans in the House now, and a lot of them have been saying no more money for the war in Ukraine. But then they suddenly change their tune when they get there, or they're really posturing hard against China. So they say, oh, no money for war against Ukraine, but we'd happily fund it if we were going to be protecting Taiwan from China. So it just feels like there's no hope for us, we the people. What, from your perspective, can we do?
Well, it is a bipartisan effort. Now, there is a block of Republican members of the House who are very concerned about the war and very opposed to it. But these are not the senior people. These are the younger people. They're not the ones who sit on as chairman of committees. So there's not a block of resistance. In the Democratic Party, there also was a group that actually sent a letter calling for an end to the war. There were 30 of them, and they sent it to President Biden, and they revoked it the day following its delivery. So I think what we need to do is, just through people like you, we need to get the word out what the level of danger is, and that there's no sense from the American perspective. The American people have nothing to gain from this war, not a single thing. And somehow people have to wake up to it, or they may discover that we lose everything.
Senator Dick Black, thank you so much for being here. Also, Colonel Dick Black, thank you for being here and giving us your insight. I know you give a lot of insight on your weekly podcast that people can tune into, but scary analysis, quite honestly, but needed to hear for sure. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Well, a lot of people in the city of New York are not happy with Mayor Eric Adams. I know here in the state of California, a lot of us are not happy with Governor Gavin Newsom. Same thing in New York, Kathy Hochul. There's a lot of governors, a lot of mayors. A lot of us are really unhappy with. Here in California, we tried to get rid of Gavin Newsom through a recall. Didn't work. With us now is Joy Newball. She is a medical freedom activist, was arrested last year in a museum for not showing proof of vaccination. She was let go from her job in the teaching profession for, again, not willing to show proof of vaccination. now is actually taking on the task of potentially getting rid of Mayor Eric Adams in New York in a very creative way. Joy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Kim.
Okay, so inquiring minds are wanting to know, how are you guys going about potentially getting rid of Eric Adams in a different way? You know, we tried recall out here in California with Newsom, but you're saying to me that there's a completely different mechanism that you're using to try to get rid of the mayor of New York.
Right. So in New York City, especially with all public servants, we have a process where we can hold public servants accountable. And that process in New York City is called a summary inquiry. Now, all public servants, from the mayor, city council, governor, even the president, they all swear an oath. They swear an oath to the Constitution. And when you have your public servants locally, whether it's state or city or county, they take an oath to the state and to your local documents. So in New York City, we have a New York City charter that governs the 5 boroughs that public servants are supposed to follow. And in that charter, there's what we say is a remedy. It's the summary inquiry. So a summary inquiry is a judicial process which allows men and women to hold public servants accountable, to have an investigation, to look into how they violated their oath. So for us, we use the administrative process, which anyone can use, and we handle our court in the private. Amongst the men and women, we served Eric Adams notices. We contracted him to his oath, which is the first step. We contract him to let him know we're accepting his oath of office to the Constitution and to the Charter. And once he violated his oath, which he did on day one, by continuing the mandates and continuing, show your vaccine status, and with firing, city employees and workers and restaurants and so forth, he violated his oath. So we sent him a notice to let him know that we are abreast of what it is that you're doing and we're hoping that you change. He didn't respond to our notices. We gave him opportune time to come into compliance. Then we sent our second notice, which is a notice of violation to cure. He did not respond to our notice. We gave him ample time. We what we call act in clean hands, which means that regardless of how much we don't like you, we want you to do the right thing. So we're waiting for you to come into compliance. And he did not come into compliance. So then we sent him our third notice, which is a notice of default. Still didn't respond. And once he did not respond to that in the time that we gave him, we took all of our notices, which many men and women have signed and sent over, and we took them into the courts, because the courts are supposed to handle these situations when men and women come and say that there is an issue, especially with our public servants, especially with our government. So we went in with our notices, and on October 5th, which is a historical day for us, men and women in New York, we started our summary inquiry into his violation to his oath of office, as well as stepping outside of the scope of his authority.
So is this something you needed a lot of signatures for?
Well, for us, we did have a certain amount of signatures. As far as the notices that were sent out, it had to have been about hundreds over time out of those 3. And those notices were taken in to the county clerk, which the county clerk reviewed. We went through the entire process of getting an index number, the entire steps, and then it was submitted to the courts for a judge to oversee it. And then we had our oral arguments. So we don't need many to do, but the more men and women do it, the more powerful it is.
So this is different than like an impeachment or a
Yes,
recall?
absolutely.
Do you know what the differences are? Like what's the main difference?
So with the summary inquiry and how it works, especially in New York, and how we're utilizing it, it allows for a public servant to be looked into, to be investigated. And based on what we put down as far as what we need done in this judicial proceeding, we want to have the judge, Supreme Court, to look into how he violated his oath of office. We put down exactly what he violated. Everything that he's done is unconstitutional, and it moves forward from there. What's different from it is it's in the people. nothing about what we've done is, with lawyers or any kind of representation. An impeachment can be done, with other members of the government, but with a summary inquiry, it can be done by men and women. We don't have to wait for, a collective or several public servants to say, oh, the people need help, and now we're going to do something. The men and women can take action right away, with or without the government.
So you say that you've had oral arguments. So did you have to go to a court and actually argue what your position was?
Yes.
And you're
So
doing this
last
without
month,
lawyers.
without lawyers. Everything is through education. We have educated ourselves in the judicial system, in the legislature, with the Constitution, the New York Constitution, as well as the New York City Charter. And it is through that education that we were able to, pro se, represent ourselves. Last month, we went in and we had our oral arguments. Adams has his defense, and we're also taking Alvin Bragg for not upholding his duties, in which he is supposed to keep Adams in check. So both are on, the ticket to be looked into, to be found that they violated their oaths. We had our oral arguments. I feel strongly that we were very successful with getting our point across, that this goes beyond the mandates, this goes beyond the vaccines, this goes beyond everything that was done. Adams harmed people. He harmed the men and women of New York, and he needs to be held accountable. So with harming, that means he violated his oath of office, which the number one thing when it comes to the Constitution is our life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which we know he violated that.
So you said that when you went in to do this, did he have a team? Did Eric Adams have somebody representing him and giving an
Yes, he
argument on
did.
his behalf? And it wasn't
Yes,
him
he did.
himself? It was a lawyer
No.
or who?
Yep.
A lawyer. And
Yeah.
so this is a process that's actually in motion. This isn't like, because a lot of times you hear about things like this and it's just, okay, yeah, we filed, but then it just gets ignored and nothing really ever happens.
Right.
Or it's like, the court isn't going to hear it, but you're already in this process. So where are you now? So you've had oral arguments. You gave your side, they gave theirs. How long ago was that, and what's next?
So this was a couple of weeks ago. It's still pending. We will eventually find out once the judge, I guess, goes through what she needs to look over the documents and look over everything and, do her best to follow the law, which is what they're supposed to uphold. Even judges, they're supposed to uphold the law, which is Constitution, which is,
Right.
our laws.
So let's say she comes back and says, yeah, you're right. He is in violation of oath of office. What next? I mean, because this is a different process, is he able to appeal it, stay in office? Like, what will this do? What's the next step from there?
Well, this is a little stronger, from what I understand, a little stronger than a lawsuit or, anything that has happened, which I know those are powerful, tort claims and Article 78. And, a lot of lawsuits have been won, especially in New York. The sanitation, they won their lawsuit in Staten Island. And, there are some lawsuits that are still in place. There are some, I know there were some updates I haven't seen yet. But with this, what results from this, if it comes back that the judge sees what we're saying and says, yes, what that allows the people to do is now move to enforcement, which true enforcement in this country is the sheriff's department. And the sheriff's department only moves when the people bring enforcement from the courts.
Right. This is really fascinating. I mean, I'm hoping that, I'm wishing you the absolute best of luck. Right now, as it stands in New York, because you're saying that this only goes into effect if he's violating the oath of office, he doesn't correct his behavior, continues to violate oath of office. So right now, what sort of mandates are still in place in New York that would put him in a position where you could say he's still violating oath of office?
I don't know if it's because I stay inside so much or, stay away from anything social, or as far as working, I'm not working. I'm not sure what mandates are still in place. I know that he, went on the news saying that if he has to put things back in place, he will. That would be considered a violation. But because he violated his oath of office on day one, he is considered holding a seat that is not his. And that's why we have taken the steps that we've taken.
Okay. Yeah. And it is really scary that that there's this possibility. They keep dangling it, right? They're like, oh, well, we might have to do it again. It's like exerting power, flexing muscles for no real reason, but just to do it, just to exert power and flex muscles. And so, really hope that you're able to get to really hold them accountable because honestly, that is the only way to prevent this from happening again is to hold the people who commit these sorts of crimes accountable when they commit them. So that the next person doesn't come along and think, oh, well, I can do that too. I'm above the law. I'm above these oaths.
Right.
I can make arbitrary and capricious mandates willy-nilly. I can make it to where sanitation workers have to do it, but athletes don't, which is why that case was ruled against the state was because they were, it was just totally arbitrary. So really the only way to hold them accountable isn't just the lawsuits like that. It's great that the sanitation workers won, but it's also the individual needs to be held accountable. The individual needs to be removed from office. The individual needs to be told, we the people are not happy with you. The problem is in places like New York and California, not enough of us are unhappy. It's like a lot of us wanted to recall Gavin Newsom, but not enough. And of course, the person that they put in opposition of him wasn't a serious enough candidate for people to really want to vote for. So, which, it makes you think they just did that on purpose. But really, that is the only way, right? That's the only way. But in places like New York and California, it's almost doomed. And then you got all these people leaving. All these people are leaving New York. They're leaving California in droves. And it's all the people that would be voting alongside us or would be making these demands. So now we're just leaving these ultra blue liberal centers, these ultra blue liberal hubs where they just run amok. The only option is to leave. And that's the really unfortunate part. Unless, I guess, you can pull something like this off. So now I know you have more tricks up your sleeve and you don't. Yeah.
I can relate to the leaving aspect. My mother and grandmother had to leave. My brother was able to get out. He retired sanitation. He was able to get out, before everything started rolling in place, and just watching family one by one just leave. So, I have a small support system here, but they had to leave. Like, it was hard. My grandmother was in a nursing home. It was terrible. My mother, trying to get health care and trying to do things, she had to leave.
Yeah.
And they went to Florida because, yes, it's better in the aspect that you
everyone's
don't
going. Right.
you don't have to worry about, having your rights violated, but no one should have to leave. Like, the people should be able to stand their ground, but that takes, education, and that takes, coming together, which I know the rallies that we've had have proven, to build that like-mindedness, and then the education comes in, and hey, we can all handle this and take every one of them for violating everything.
Well, that's what we can certainly hope. I wish you the absolute best. As I was saying, I know you've got more tricks up your sleeve. You don't want to reveal all your cards, so that's totally fine. Because we wish you the best of luck and we want you to have success. So by all means, go for it. Keep us posted with how things are going.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate you. Appreciate all of your efforts. Really, you're fighting the fight. Truly, and that is a really wonderful thing, Joy. Thank you so much. Is there anything people can do to help you? Do you have a website? Is there anything?
Yes. So the assembly, who, the members like myself and the other counties that are in New York, we have a website, nydejure.info. That's nydejure.info. And then I'm also a part of New York Freedom Rally, which is a huge grassroots organization that has been boots on the ground since the end of 2020. They have a Give, Send, Go /NYFR. And they're just trying to raise money to help, people who have lost their jobs, build communities, start homeschooling pods, any little bit helps. And they have been great.
All right, Joy. Best of luck. Thanks for being here. Keep us posted.
Thank you so much.
Well, as you've heard from tonight's show, we might be really marching into a hot war. We've got mayors, trying to run our lives with mandates. We've got, it's just, things are crazy out there. So now is a good time to think about your future. Think about not relying on what the government is doing and whether or not they're going to be propping up the economy, tanking the economy, the dollar. We don't even know what's going on with that. So investing in gold is something you should really be thinking about. Investing in precious metals. I'm a big fan of this personally. Precious metals are something you're able to take with you in the event of a catastrophic crisis. And it's everybody recognizes it. It's not like the US dollar that may or may not be worth something, or some other currency that may or may not be worth something as you travel around because there's some sort of, World War III or nuclear event or something. So gold is something that people can actually recognize. So I'm a really big fan of investing in gold, and Birch Gold makes this really easy to do. You can get physical gold and precious metals. You can get an IRA, that is an IRA in precious metals. You can convert your IRA or your 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Birch Gold helps you do that. All you've got to do is go to birchgold.com/Kim to get your free info kit. You'll talk to a precious metals specialist. They will answer all of your questions. They will walk you through the entire process. And it's really easy to do when you work with Birch Gold on this. They've got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Lots of people really are very satisfied with their services. So if you're really thinking about, oh no, what's coming up, because things are getting pretty scary, then now would be a time to maybe even be thinking about getting into precious metals, changing up some of your investments, not putting all of your eggs in one basket, diversifying your portfolio. This would be a good time to do it, I think, as we see ourselves escalating into places we don't really want to be escalating to. So once again, go to birchgold.com/Kim to get your free info kit on how you can start getting yourself into the precious metals world to protect your future, or to at least secure it a bit better, diversify some more. So again, birchgold.com/Kim for your free info kit. All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for joining us. Really, eye-opening, enlightening. If you have any comments, you want to make a suggestion, you can email into the show, kim@kimiverson.com. You can reach me. I don't respond to all of my emails, but I do respond to some, and I do read them. So if you have a comment, question, anything, just go ahead and message me, kim@kimiverson.com. You can also join my locals community. You just hit that button, join the locals community there. I do live streams. This week we weren't able to do it because we were traveling, but we're getting back into the groove. So next week we will be back into doing our after show. But right now we're traveling. I got a producer that's stuck in a snowstorm. It's really just, everything's kind of crazy right now. So we're just trying to get our bearings together. But normally we're doing our live stream there on locals once a week. Check that out. Join the community. Lots of great information there. I always get really interesting postings, articles, and more information from my locals community. So really appreciate your support. It is how you can help support my independent venture, my independent journalism. You can do that through locals. So thank you very much. All right, guys, that's it. We will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow we've got a really, one of our Friday conversations. We will be sitting down with economist Richard Werner. And this is not, I know some of you might be thinking, oh no, an economist like this, is this going to be interesting? I'm telling you, I believe that the conversation I'm going to have tomorrow is one of the most important conversations that I could have. And it's one of the most important conversations you could hear. I really believe it is what he is going to tell us is exposing the root of all of our problems, of all evil, the root of who is really truly controlling the world. And you've really got to hear this conversation. That'll be happening tomorrow. So same time, same place. It'll be life-changing, eye-opening, all of those things. We will see you then. Thank you so much for watching.